September 6th, 1970. It began like any other Sunday. Airliners climbed into clear blue skies carrying families, businessmen, students, and tourists. Flight attendants smiled as they served coffee. Pilots followed their routes, expecting another routine journey. No one on board imagined that within hours, the world would witness one of the most shocking acts of aviation terrorism in history. Not one aircraft, not two, but multiple international passenger jets would be hijacked almost simultaneously. Hundreds of innocent lives would become bargaining chips in a dangerous political conflict. Governments would panic, military forces would prepare for war, and in the middle of Jordan's desert, a lonely, abandoned airstrip would become the center of a global crisis. This was not just another hijacking, it was an operation designed to capture the attention of the entire world. This is the story of the Dawson's Field hijackings, the event that changed aviation security forever. To understand how this extraordinary event unfolded, we must first travel back to the late 1960s. The Middle East was in turmoil. The 1967 Six-Day War had dramatically reshaped the region. Israel had captured territories from neighboring Arab states, leaving millions of Palestinians displaced and fueling anger across the Arab world. Among the many Palestinian organizations that emerged during this period was the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, better known as the PFLP. Unlike many other groups, the PFLP believed that international attention could be gained by targeting symbols of Western power. Commercial airliners soon became one of those symbols. Every successful hijacking generated headlines around the globe. The organization believed that if the world's media focused on their actions, governments would be forced to pay attention to the Palestinian cause. By 1970, hijackings were becoming more frequent, but what the PFLP was planning next was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It would involve several aircraft, multiple countries, and hundreds of hostages. The operation required months of planning. Its success depended on perfect timing, and its consequences would echo for decades. Behind closed doors, members of the PFLP carefully selected their targets. The chosen flights belonged to major international airlines carrying passengers from different nationalities. The idea was simple, but incredibly dangerous. Instead of hijacking one aircraft, they would seize several at nearly the same time. This would overwhelm governments, confuse security agencies, and ensure non-stop global media coverage. Each team had a specific assignment. Each member memorized every detail. Every minute mattered. Fake identities were prepared. Travel documents were arranged. Weapons small enough to avoid suspicion were carefully concealed. The operation was approaching. Meanwhile, thousands of ordinary travelers unknowingly booked tickets on flights that would soon become part of history. Some were returning home after vacations. Others were traveling for business. Families carried gifts. Children looked forward to seeing relatives. None of them realized they were about to become hostages in one of history's most daring, coordinated hijackings. On the morning of September 6th, airports across Europe appeared completely normal. Passengers checked their luggage. Pilots completed final inspections. Ground crews loaded baggage. Departure boards displayed destinations across the Atlantic and the Middle East. Everything looked routine, yet hidden among the passengers were individuals carrying out one of the most carefully coordinated hijacking operations ever attempted. They appeared calm. They smiled at airport staff. They blended perfectly into the crowd. No one suspected what would happen once those aircraft reached cruising altitude. Within just a few hours, routine flights would become international hostage crises. The skies were calm, but history was about to change forever. In 2017, the hijackings begin. You'll see how the hijackers took control of multiple airliners, how terrified passengers reacted, and why several aircraft were forced toward a remote desert airstrip in Jordan.
The doors had closed. The aircraft were climbing steadily through the clouds. Passengers relaxed into their seats. Some read newspapers, others chatted quietly, while children gazed out the windows at the shrinking cities below. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then, in a matter of seconds, the calm disappeared. Armed hijackers stood up from their seats. Weapons appeared. Voices turned into screams. And several commercial airliners, flying hundreds of miles apart, suddenly became crime scenes in the sky. The operation had begun. On September 6, 1970, members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, launched one of the most ambitious hijacking operations in aviation history. Their objective was unlike anything seen before. Instead of targeting a single aircraft, they attempted to seize multiple international flights almost simultaneously, creating a worldwide political crisis. Their targets included aircraft operated by major international airlines. Each hijacking team had spent weeks preparing.
They had studied airline schedules, airport procedures, and flight routes. Timing was everything. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the hijackers moved. Some forced their way into the cockpit. Others ordered passengers to remain seated with their hands visible. The message was clear: no one move, stay calm, and no one will be harmed. For the passengers, time seemed to stop. Inside the cabins, confusion spread instantly. Parents pulled their children close. Flight attendants tried to calm terrified passengers while following the hijackers' instructions. Many travelers couldn't understand what was happening. Some believed it was a robbery. Others feared the aircraft would be destroyed. The pilots suddenly found themselves facing impossible decisions. With weapons pointed at them, they were ordered to change course. Instead of continuing toward their scheduled destinations, the aircraft were redirected toward the Middle East. On the ground, air traffic controllers noticed something unusual. Several aircraft were no longer following their assigned routes. Radio transmissions became tense. Emergency messages began reaching aviation authorities. Within minutes, governments realized this was not an isolated incident. It was a coordinated international attack. Not every hijacking went according to plan. One team attempted to seize an aircraft but met unexpected resistance. The situation escalated quickly. The aircraft's crew and onboard security fought back. The hijackers failed to gain full control. The plane was forced to divert and land safely. Although this part of the operation did not succeed as planned, it revealed just how dangerous and unpredictable these events had become. Meanwhile, the other hijacked aircraft continued toward their new destinations. Hundreds of passengers remained trapped, uncertain whether they would ever return home. News spread rapidly. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Radio broadcasters delivered urgent updates. Newspapers rushed to print special editions. Families gathered around their televisions, desperate for information. Airlines established emergency response centers. Governments held crisis meetings. Military officials monitored the situation closely. No one knew how it would end. Would the hijackers begin executing hostages? Would military forces attempt a rescue? Or would negotiations prevent further bloodshed? Every hour increased the tension. Every decision carried enormous risks. The fate of hundreds of innocent people now rested in the hands of political leaders, negotiators, and the hijackers themselves. As daylight faded over the Middle East, the hijacked aircraft continued toward a remote desert airstrip in Jordan. There, the world was about to witness an unforgettable scene. Several massive passenger jets would soon be parked side by side in the middle of the desert, transforming an abandoned airfield into the center of an international hostage crisis. What happened next would shock the entire world. In 19, you'll see how the hijacked airliners arrived at Dawson's Field, why hundreds of passengers were held hostage, and how the crisis pushed Jordan to the brink of civil war.
The world had never seen anything like it. In the middle of Jordan's scorching desert, enormous passenger jets stood motionless on an abandoned airstrip. Inside them were hundreds of frightened hostages. Outside, armed militants guarded every movement. Millions of people around the world watched the crisis unfold through newspaper headlines and television reports, wondering the same question: would these people ever make it home alive? The destination chosen by the hijackers was a remote airstrip in Jordan known as Dawson's Field, an abandoned former military landing strip. Its isolated location made it almost impossible for security forces to launch a surprise rescue. As the hijacked aircraft landed one after another, the empty desert became the center of international attention. For the passengers, the sight was surreal. Instead of arriving at busy international airports, they found themselves surrounded by sand, armed guards, and uncertainty. No one knew how long they would remain there. No one knew whether negotiations would succeed. The first hours were filled with fear. Passengers were ordered to remain calm while hijackers maintained strict control. Food and water were limited at times, and the intense desert heat made conditions even more difficult. Flight attendants continued helping passengers despite the danger, offering reassurance whenever they could. Children cried. Parents tried to comfort their families. Some passengers quietly wrote farewell notes, believing they might never leave the desert alive. Yet despite the tension, the hijackers generally avoided unnecessary violence against the hostages.
hostages, knowing the passengers were their strongest bargaining tool. Every hostage represented pressure on governments around the world. The hijackers announced that they wanted the release of prisoners held in several countries. Their demands immediately triggered urgent diplomatic negotiations. Governments faced an impossible choice. If they agreed, they risked encouraging future hijackings. If they refused, hundreds of innocent lives could be lost. The United States, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Israel, and Jordan all became deeply involved in the crisis. Behind closed doors, diplomats worked around the clock. Military commanders prepared contingency plans. Intelligence agencies searched desperately for information. Every passing hour increased the pressure. While the world focused on the hostages, another crisis was unfolding inside Jordan itself. Palestinian armed groups had become increasingly powerful within the country, creating growing tension with the Jordanian government led by King Hussein. The presence of the hijacked aircraft on Jordanian soil made an already fragile situation even more dangerous. The kingdom feared that the crisis could spiral into open conflict. Military units were placed on alert. Roadblocks appeared. The atmosphere across Jordan became increasingly tense. What had begun as an aviation hijacking was now threatening the stability of an entire nation. Television cameras remained fixed on the unfolding drama. Families of the hostages waited anxiously for news. Every rumor spread quickly. Every official statement was analyzed. Every hour without violence offered hope. But everyone knew that one wrong decision could end in tragedy. Negotiators continued working behind the scenes, searching for a peaceful solution before time ran out. The crisis had become one of the biggest international stories of the decade. The hostages were still alive. The negotiations were still underway. But the most unforgettable moment of the entire crisis was yet to come. In $1 Million, you'll witness the dramatic conclusion, the release of many hostages, the shocking destruction of the hijacked airliners in the desert, and how the crisis helped reshape international aviation security for decades to come.
As negotiations continued, progress was slow. Governments, diplomats, and representatives of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, exchanged messages almost around the clock. The hijackers insisted that their demands be taken seriously. Meanwhile, many women, children, and passengers considered non-essential to their political objectives were gradually released. However, a smaller group of hostages remained in captivity as leverage. Their fate remained uncertain. Military rescue operations were discussed, but the risks were enormous. One mistake could cost dozens of innocent lives. For that reason, negotiators continued searching for a peaceful solution. Then came the moment that stunned the world. After many of the hostages had been removed from the aircraft, the hijackers placed explosive charges inside the empty airliners. Television cameras and journalists waited from a safe distance. Moments later, the first explosion ripped through the silence. Flames burst from the aircraft's fuselage. Then another explosion followed. Soon, all three airliners were engulfed in fire. The massive jets, once symbols of international travel, were reduced to twisted metal and ashes. The destruction was deliberate. The hijackers wanted the world to see that they were willing to destroy millions of dollars worth of aircraft to prove their determination and keep global attention focused on their cause. The dramatic images spread across newspapers and television broadcasts worldwide. For millions of people, those burning airplanes became the defining image of the crisis. Despite the destruction of the aircraft, negotiations continued. Over the following days, agreements were gradually reached. The remaining hostages were released. Families who had spent days fearing the worst were finally reunited with their loved ones. There was relief, but there was also a painful realization. The crisis had exposed serious weaknesses in international aviation security. Airports around the world had been unprepared for a coordinated attack of this scale. Governments knew that major changes could no longer be delayed. The Dawson's Field hijackings became a turning point in aviation history. In the years that followed, airports introduced much stricter security measures. Passenger screening became more thorough. Baggage inspections improved. International cooperation between intelligence agencies expanded. Airlines trained crews to respond more effectively to emergencies. Many of the security procedures travelers experience today trace their origins to lessons learned from incidents like Dawson's Field. The crisis also intensified political tensions in Jordan, contributing to the conflict known as Black September, a major confrontation between the Jordanian government and Palestinian armed groups later in 1970. Its political consequences continued to shape the Middle East for years. More than
than half a century has passed since those extraordinary events, yet the photographs of burning airliners in the Jordanian desert remain among the most powerful images ever captured in aviation history. The Dawson's Field hijackings were more than a series of aircraft seizures. They became a global turning point that transformed aviation security, international diplomacy, and the world's understanding of modern terrorism. It was a crisis that began in the skies, but changed the world on the ground. The end.